It was my first semester of 2001, and there I was, in front of my design class. It was time for the critique. In design, whenever you finished a project, you had to present your work in front of the entire class. And anyone could tell you what they thought of your work. I hated it. I was extremely shy and introverted, so being the center of attention was already bad enough, let alone having my work critiqued in front of the entire class. And this project was extremely challenging for me. Despite pouring my best efforts into it, I really, really, really struggled. So there I was in front of my class, and the most unbelievable thing happened. My professor looks down at my work, and then he looks at me. And then he continues to stare down at my work. My face starts to become flush, sweat starts to creep down my back. He asks me a couple more small questions about it, and then he did this. I was stunned. At first, I was kind of in disbelief. Did he really just rip up my work in front of the entire class? And then I was mortified. And when it fully hit me, I was completely humiliated. I wanted to run out of that classroom and cry my eyes out. And to be honest, the rest of that day was a complete blur for me. When I finally got home that night, all I could see was my professor ripping up my work, and all I could feel was hurt and embarrassment. And that's when my gremlins of limiting beliefs surfaced. You see, when I was first accepted into design, I thought I was so lucky because the acceptance rate was less than 5%. You already had to be good even to be selected. And I felt like a complete imposter in design because I wasn't like the rest of the students. I didn't have a fine arts background. So that night, I seriously thought whether or not I should stay in design or change my majors. Because after all, how could I face my professor again or those classmates? And maybe I just wasn't cut out for design after all. It's been over 23 years since that day. I did stay in design, but that day scarred me. Because it was one of the first times in my life that I didn't feel psychologically safe. And at that time, I didn't even know what psychological safety was. I just knew how it made me feel. Shut down and small. A psychologically safe environment is where everyone feels safe to share their ideas, be supported, and explore possibilities. It's a place of flourishing. And when psychological safety is present in the workplace, it leads to healthier relationships. It can change your company's ability to innovate. And ultimately, it can change the world. Imagine a world where you could achieve more than you realized. A world where you could reach new levels of innovation and creativity. A world where everyone was empowered to realize their untapped innovative potential. You and I can create that kind of world when we create psychological safety for others. And it's up to you to make that happen. You see, I don't know this from theory, I know it from real world experiences. I'm in the possibility business. And in my work, I have found that there is nothing more important than to create psychologically safe environments in order for innovation and creativity to thrive. During my many years working in corporate, I led a lot of innovation workshops. And after each one, I always asked for feedback. The consistent theme that I saw in those feedback surveys were that people felt safe. And because they felt safe, they were more innovative and creative. When I shared this at a conference a few years ago, one of the participants told me that psychological safety led to a $1 million idea for his organization. His team was brainstorming, and the facilitator noticed one individual on the verge of shutting down her own idea. I call that the tipping point of uncertainty. With his help, he was able to encourage her to share what was on her mind and eventually share it with the rest of the group. And long story short, that idea eventually went to market and it earned that company $1 million in revenue. Isn't that amazing? But it's not just financial though. The benefits of psychological safety are far-reaching. It leads to more innovation and creativity. It helps us build stronger, healthier relationships. And ultimately, it creates the most successful teams. Google did a 2-year research study with 180 teams called Project Aristotle. And their number one criteria they found for team success and effectiveness was psychological safety. I got to experience this for myself in 2017. I was hired as an innovation consultant for a quick service restaurant chain to make innovation better. Anything was up for improvements, including their 30,000 square foot innovation center called Hatch. I had this bold idea to make it better. I was going to completely change up the entire floor plan with a new design. But there was a problem. The team already had plans to redesign Hatch for the following year, so my ideas would disrupt that. And I also just didn't want to be that guy. Of course, the new innovation consultant would want to change everything up, right? So months passed, and I sat silent on the idea. Until one day I realized if I was doing the job they hired me for, I had to say something to my boss, Michael. And that's when fear rushed in and my limiting beliefs surfaced. What on earth was I thinking? I never designed an innovation center before. And what if he treated me the way my professor did and ripped up my ideas? But I knew I had to say something. Michael had no idea I had been mulling over this idea for months, so I approached him with a lot of fear. And as I spoke with him, I fully expected him to say no because of business realities. After all, they already had plans for the following year. But the most unbelievable thing happened. As I spoke, all Michael did was lean in and listen. He created a safe environment for me to share my ideas and explore possibilities together. So I did. I shared with him my ideas to turn Hatch from an innovation doing center to an innovation learning center, to create different neighborhoods with strategic purposes, and to create a central courtyard in the middle of the building where everyone had to walk through in order to collaborate. At the end of our conversation, Michael looks at me and he says, "Yes, let's do this. Let's present this to the VP of Innovation and see what he says." Wait, what? I couldn't believe my ears. You want me to present this to the VP of Innovation? My heart was beating out of my chest. And then, long story short, I did. I got to redesign their 30,000 square foot innovation center. To this very day, it's still one of my career highlights. All because I was able to speak up and push past my fear. And all because Michael was able to create a safe environment for me to share my ideas and explore possibilities. It was because of his encouragements that it all became possible, and I was able to do something I never dreamed of. I was scarred by my professor, but decades later, I was empowered by my boss. One created an environment of psychological safety, and the other did not. So how do we do this? How do we create environments for ourselves and others to bring the best, most innovative, creative selves to our work? It starts with addressing the number one barrier standing in our way: fear. When fear is present, innovation is stifled. In 2022, McKinsey & Company did a study, and they found that fear is the number one barrier to innovation. They did a poll, and they found that over 85% of innovation practitioners reported fear as often or always holding back innovation. They also discovered that only 25% of organizations actually understood that fear, and fewer than 11% were doing anything about it. Fear also reduces your creativity. In order to understand this, let's talk about two parts of the brain for a moment: the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. Whenever you're calm or relaxed, your prefrontal cortex is in control, and this is where your creative thinking happens. The amygdala governs strong emotions like fear. Whenever you face a threat, real or perceived, your amygdala activates and you'll respond in one of four ways. Fight, you attack. Flight, you run. Freeze, you get stuck. And fawn, you please. When your amygdala activates, your prefrontal cortex is no longer in control and it goes offline. In other words, when fear is present, both innovation and creativity shut down. Here's the deal. Sharing your ideas with others is scary. You don't know how people are going to respond to you because you can't predict what will happen. Will you get a professor who rips up your work, or will you get a boss who fully supports it? Whenever you share, you enter a liminal space. It's the tipping point of uncertainty and the psychological unknown. Will people support you, discourage you, look at you with a blank stare? We all long for support for our ideas, especially when we're unsure about them. If you encounter negativity from that person, when you share your ideas, psychological harm may result. And depending on the trauma that happens, it can hurt you in that micro moment, or it can scar you like my professor did to me. And worse, it can shut you down long term. We want to avoid doing this to others at all costs. Your brain remembers trauma like this, and if you were to find yourself in a situation like it again, your amygdala will kick in to try to protect you. And it makes overcoming that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response that much harder. But in spite of this fear, you have to push through it because it is the only way. Henry Fonda was a prolific actor with a career of over 5 decades on both Broadway and Hollywood. And even when he was 75 years old, he still threw up before each of his stage performances. In other words, his fear never went away, but he pushed through it. Working out that fear in your life requires that you fight and address those gremlins of limiting beliefs through introspective work. But when it comes to creating psychological safety for others, it's actually easier than you think. It all comes down to one simple truth, that all of us want to be known, seen, and heard. The best thing you can do for others is becoming psychologically safe for them. It helps give them the courage they need to speak up when they're at that tipping point of uncertainty. Because remember, when people approach you and they share their ideas with you, it's vulnerable for them. They're trusting you to hold space for them. They're taking a risk with you. It's very likely they're fighting off their own psychological scars, gremlins of limiting beliefs, and fear. So the way you do this is with a tool I call With Your Words. Become students of observation and active listening. Watch and listen closely to what people say and do because they'll often give hints of their uncertainty. They may say things like, "I'm not sure about this." "Well, this probably won't work." "This might sound crazy." "Never mind, I don't know what I'm saying." And their posture might look like shrugging or looking down or looking a bit jittery. Their voices may sound shaky or soft. When this happens, it's a critical moment. It's very likely they're on the verge of shutting down their own idea, and if you miss it, their idea may disappear forever. This is where an encouraging nudge will create safety for them and help them explore what's on their mind. So let me give you some examples. If you hear, "I'm not sure about this," say, "Tell me more about that." "Well, this probably won't work." Say, "Why don't you run with that?" "This might sound crazy." Crazy is what we need right now. What do you have? "Never mind, I don't know what I'm saying." Say, "What are you thinking about that?" This will take some practice, but the more you do it, the easier it'll become. The more that you observe and listen to others, the more you'll be able to pick up on those nonverbal and verbal cues of their uncertainty. Nurture psychological safety for them by giving them that encouraging nudge and help them explore what's on their mind, like Michael did for me. This tool is not just for business. You can also use it in your personal life. When I shared it at a conference, a mother said she would use it with her children. At another conference I spoke at, a wife said it would save her marriage. So how about you? What would your relationships look like if you created psychological safety for the people in your life? When I look back on being 19 years old in that professor's class, watching him rip up my design to shreds, I had no idea that that would shape who I've become and what I'd spend my life doing. Helping others flourish by creating safe, innovative environments. So you know what? I'm thankful for it. It was because of that experience I decided that I would never treat people the way my professor treated me. I would never make people feel the way my professor made me feel. I would be someone who would be safe for others to explore their ideas. I would be someone to empower and support others. That's the decision each of you get to make here today. Will you create psychologically safe environments where everyone is safe to share their ideas, be supported, and explore possibilities? Will you open the doors for others to flourish? Will you be a Michael of this world? I'm inviting you to join me. Be an agent of psychological safety today. Because when you do, the world will be a better place. A place of healthy relationships and successful teams. A place filled with possibilities. A place full of innovation. A world of flourishing. It all starts with us, And it all starts with you. Thank you.